Okay, so Hare Krishna, dear ladies. Welcome to the August Urban Devi Sangha and Women's Discussion Group. A special welcome to those joining us for the first time. If you are joining us for the first time, please write it in the chat. We would love to welcome you, and I promise we're a very welcoming group. My name is Damodar Priya Devi Dasi, and I co-host this monthly gathering with our dear Rukmini Walker and Surbi Govinda Devi Dasi. So let me introduce our guest speaker for today. Gopi Mata Devi Dasi, or Gopi Sandal, grew up in the midwestern USA, and in 1977, she traveled to London where she met her guru, Srila Prabhupada. She stayed for 10 years in the ashram there and later married and moved back to the US, where she and her husband raised 3 sons. Gopi has been teaching yoga for over 30 years in Kansas and created the Yoga with Heart Teacher Training School. She lives on a 40-acre farm called Bhaktivana, which is an intentional spiritual community. Along with her friends and family there, she hosts regular programs to celebrate Krishna consciousness with Kirtan, Prasadam, and Bhakti philosophy. Gopi offers free online classes on Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, and other Bhakti philosophy studies. And if you're interested in joining any of her classes, we'll be sharing her contact info in the chat so we can go from there. But for now, let me just speak briefly on our topic, which is amazing: why we are who we are, the ins and outs of karma. So Gopi is going to help us discuss the different types of karma. Both our gross and subtle bodies are a result of past actions and choices we make that are now creating our future. So she's going to help us answer how and why we should stop this wheel of karma and return to our spiritual roots. So thank you so much, Gopi Sandal, for joining us today. The floor is yours.
Hello. So nice to be with you guys. And yeah, I'd like to offer my heartfelt thanks to my teacher, Srila Prabhupada, for giving me a clue about this most important information. It's been such a joy for me to try to learn about it. So I'm excited to share some things. And I'd like to thank Rukmini so much for her being a shining star who is guiding us all on the path of love. And Damodar Priya, thank you so much for organizing everything. Great job. So yes, topic of today's discussion is why we are who we are. And so our soul is on such a long journey. I think many people don't realize until they come in contact with this philosophy that we've probably been cycling for millions of lifetimes in the material world. And it's explained in the Srimad Bhagavatam, some of the Vedic literatures that we study, that there are at least 8,400,000 species of life. And so the soul, when we come into this material world, we may take a very humble position as an amoeba or as a germ, and then gradually become a bigger bug, and then gradually a mouse, and then a kitty cat, and then progress through different bodies who have different levels of consciousness. And so in the animal species, we are just following laws of nature. The animals are interested in eating, sleeping, mating and defending themselves. And really, they don't create any new karma when they're in those bodies. Gradually, as we progress, we come to the human form of life, which is very special because we have the ability to ask, well, who am I? Why am I here? What is my relationship with my creator? So that differentiates us from all the animals, and it also brings some responsibility that there is a cosmic balance that we need to participate in. So if somehow or other we're not able to return what we've been given, or we cause some harm to other living entities, what goes around comes around. And it's an infallible law. Sometimes we hear that if a child touches the flame of a fire, there are no, even though they are so innocent at that age, they there's no way out. It's a law of nature. It's a law. So karma is kind of like that. And when we say karma, it can refer to both the actions that we do and the result that's going to come from those actions. So we don't know how many different costumes we've been wearing, and what type of mischief we may have gotten up while we're wearing those costumes. So Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, many, many births both you and I have passed. I can remember all of them, but you cannot, O subduer of the enemy. So he's talking to his friend Arjuna, who is experiencing a kind of dark night of the soul, a very difficult time. Krishna is advising him, and Krishna makes it clear that I never have to take birth. I never have to die. I always remember everything that I experience. I remember. I also know what you have experienced for many lifetimes and what your future is. And every single living entity Krishna is aware of. So he's infallible, but we have like each dream that we wake up to, we've lost our memory again, right? Generally. So occasionally there is someone who can remember, but it's probably just as well that we forget. Otherwise, it could be so confusing to be in this body and thinking, maybe I should still be doing this kind of work or this kind of career, or and we don't have facility for that. So it's the subtle body that is carrying our soul and some baggage with it from the physical body. Our body dies, and then the subtle body, consisting of the mind, intelligence, and the false ego, will take us to our future body, depending on what we desire and what we deserve. So it's said that if you want to know who you were in your past life, look at the body you have now. If you want to know who you're going to be in your future life, look at the mind you have now. So our desires are bringing us into exactly the right body to help to fulfill the desires that we have, as well as, whatever higher intelligence discerns is what we deserve. So it's a mix. Excuse me. So, imagine a family where there are two sisters. One of them is quite secure and outgoing and contented. The other sister is introverted and fearful and paranoid. So, maybe the parents are thinking, what's wrong with this girl? Why can't she be like her sister? There's no reason that she should be having these kinds of problems. But they may not know that before she was in her baby body, she died in a very stressful condition, perhaps in a war-torn country where she was experiencing trauma and violence. And so that is going to be carried on to her next body. She's forgotten the specifics, but she's still experiencing those kinds of anxieties, right? Or, consider a child who is born with just incredible talent. They're a prodigy at playing the piano, and no one can understand why they're like this without having, studied for years. It's just there. Or like our Srila Prabhupada, he mentioned that the famous sitar player, Ravi Shankar, he said, yes, he has studied this instrument for 7 lifetimes to be so expert. And there is there are many stories of especially young children who can remember their previous lives. Often, like when they're around 3 years old until they're maybe 5 or 6, they might start to forget a little bit, but they'll start mentioning. And I read a book about children's past life memories one time. Hundreds, there's so many people, but the author suggested, if you want to know who you were in your last life, it's pretty simple. You look at what your interests are now. Did you like, or have you been fascinated with France and wanting to learn the language, or do you love doing a certain kind of art or a certain kind of work? It may be that that has come from a previous life. And I read this beautiful story about a little girl in India named Shukla Gupta. And she, when she was only 1.5 years old, she was cuddling dolls like many little girls do. But she would cry and say, I miss my daughter, Meena. I miss her so much. And then as she got a little older, 3 or 4 years old, she started revealing that, yes, I remember Meena's father, and he lived in this village, and we lived in this kind of house, and I want to go to that house. And somehow or other, her father worked on the railway with a man who had been to that village that his little daughter was mentioning. And he even had heard of a person with the name of who she said was her former husband. And she kept saying, you know, I have to go there. I'm going by myself if you don't take me. Just a little girl. And so they took her there, and she was able to guide them to where her home was. She was a little flummoxed because the door wasn't in the right spot. She said it should be on this street. And they said, oh, we changed the entryway. Actually, it was on that place where you thought it should be. And out of 30 people, she was able to point out her former husband and name some of his brothers by nicknames who the local people didn't even know, but she was correct. And so she got to meet her little daughter, who was now 12 years old. So Mina was like 3 or 4, and she told her daughter, I'm little now, but I love you. And she was very affectionate. She like remembered it all in such a fresh way. So it happens. But do you guys know of anybody? Have you heard stories about people who remember their previous life? It's fascinating. And and it makes us wonder about our own situation. How did I come to this point? How did I develop these deep desires to know about spiritual life? What have I gone through that's brought me to this point of trying to figure it all out? And so the Bhakti yogis, you know, even though they understand I am an eternal spirit soul, I'm connected in love with the Supreme Being, and I'm on this long journey, but they are grounded in the costume that they're in right now. And, you know, learn to be comfortable with who I am, and that, you know, I've been put in this situation so that I can do a particular type of work, I can follow my own dharma, and, you know, purify my existence by being who I am and doing what I love to do. We might ask, well, is everything that happens to me my karma? Are there ever accidents, or how does it work? So it's explained that, you know, sometimes there is an influence from the world around us. Some kind of higher authority may arrange that there's a big weather phenomena, a tsunami comes to my village, or you know, a war breaks out. So these influence the you know, life that I'm living, but generally, you know, what comes to us is somehow or other based on things that I have done and thought previously. So there are in some traditions, they talk about the different types of karma, that they're compared to like seeds that have been planted. So there is something called sanchitta, which is the total stock of karma, like all the seeds that have been thrown out there. And then there is something called prarabdha karma. So not important that we know the Sanskrit name, but there is a name for them. that refers to the karma that is sprouting now. So the seeds have been there for some time, and now they're coming out. And I'm experiencing the root. And then there's sometimes called kriyamana or agami karma. And that is seeds that I'm planting right now that may come up soon. We could ask, why do bad things happen to good people sometimes? They appear to be doing, well, being kind, but if we have this little bit bigger picture, it's easier to understand how these seeds do not sprout at the same time and that they planted at different times. So an example is given that, like, if a farmer has a silo and begins putting his best seed in the silo, then he's going to get good results. People will come and buy it, be quite happy, get a good reputation as a farmer. And then eventually he may start adding at the top of the silo some seeds some grains that are not that good quality. So then over time, those are going to come through, right? And it's like, oh, but he seemed to be such, giving us such good quality, and what's happening? So that can happen. And so we might ask, who's to say what are good actions and bad actions, right? Some people say that, well, it's up to the individual what they decide. And so it's kind of become popular to have this kind of relativized morality now, that, it's just like anarchy, whatever you think is right is fine. But we can understand that it doesn't always work out like that. I mean, what if we just decided that, stoplights are so stupid, I'm not going to pay attention to them. It's not my thing. It's just not my mood. And so if we didn't follow that law, there would be big chaos on the road. Or someone was telling how they gave a talk for Amazon, for a giant corporation, and they revealed that even though we show people sometimes advertise people dressed in quite revealing clothing, men and women, but they said we will not put those kind of clothes on children because we don't want to promote in any way the possibility of pedophilia. That's something that we feel is just wrong, right? And so there are other people in the world saying, no, it's great, it's fine, we should train up all the kids. And but we kind of intuitively know that there are certain things that are not so good. So and the results of our karma, they're not really consecutive either. We may think, well, I've been doing virtuous activity for a long time. I should be getting, some good reactions. Sometimes people decide that, like in ancient India, they knew that if I want to go to a heavenly planet, that they had heard that there are places where people live for thousands of years, and they have a very, very high standard of enjoyment there, and that it's possible to go in their next life if they do this special kind of fire yoga, special sacrifices, and try to amass heaps of pious activities and pray to God, let me go to this beautiful heavenly situation. And so they may be able to do that, but the wisdom scriptures, they explain that even though it's such a long time, it's so good, it's also a temporary situation. After thousands of years, they're going to have to leave that situation, and there's every possibility that they could then have to go to bounce back down to a situation where there is suffering involved. Maybe come back to this earth planet where it's a mixed bag. There's some heavenly kind of situation here, but there's also very hellish situations. So, so it's not a solution, right? But it is natural that we will want pleasure. The soul is hardwired to want pleasure, to want happiness, and so of course we're looking for it, in heavenly realms, unless we learn that this is also temporary. So what we really want is the ocean of bliss. We don't want just a drop. We don't want it for a minute. We want the whole thing. And so the soul is really not satisfied until we get that, right? And therefore, we're like wandering, trying to find that situation where we feel fully satisfied, trying to fill the God-shaped hole with anything we can grab. And so, it's kind of like the donkey that has, you hold a stick with a carrot on it in front of their face, and they keep going forward, thinking, yes, very soon I'm going to get that carrot. It's going to be so juicy if I just keep going. And so like that, the material nature encourages us to try something else. Keep trying. Surely it's going to be the thing. It's going to be good. And, but like the donkey, even though we've been hankering like anything to enjoy, maybe we actually, in this world, somehow or other, we try to get satisfaction. And so we're hankering, and then maybe we get it, but it's not what we had hoped. It's not as good. Or maybe we get it, and then it disappears after a while. It's temporary. Maybe that person died, or that we were trying to get, or our car broke, or there's so much maintenance, or like that. So this knowledge of karma, it's a kind of cosmic sensitivity training, that it's when we get the results of the activities that we've been doing. It may not be an exact, it may not be like I broke someone's leg and then I have to get my leg broken. There might be something slightly different situation, but it's the principle of the thing that kind of sinks deeply into our psyche and helps us understand. So when we, also see other people making mistakes, then we have a little more compassion. We realize, I've made so many mistakes. And, Krishna is actually trying to guide us in a favorable way to use those mistakes to ultimately come to our highest good. Just like in a car, we have our GPS and it says turn right, but we turn left. But the GPS isn't going to say, you idiot, forget it, I'm not going to help you anymore. The GPS is redirecting or reconfiguring. So it's going to then help us to find a way to get around that, to get to our ultimate goal, right? And so so by having this understanding of how karma works, then gradually we understand that I make mistakes. I have expectations to do right things, but I also have acceptance that it's part of my learning process to make mistakes. And I see other people doing that. Maybe previously we thought, well, I should fix them. They're just wrong and they're not acting the way I want them to. But by having this bigger picture, we may be able to cut them some slack and to be tolerant, right? And more patient, to stop blaming the world outside myself, and to just try to be a virtuous person myself. So and it's an impetus for us to try to stop the cycle of suffering, right? Happiness and distress, happiness and distress. That's what it's all about, happiness and distress, right? So is it really possible to find lasting contentment? Krishna says, yes, absolutely. I'm going to show you how. And there are a couple verses in Bhagavad Gita where he says, 8:7, therefore, Arjuna, you should always think of me in the form of Krishna, and at the same time carry out your prescribed duty of fighting. With your activities dedicated to me and your mind and intelligence fixed on me, you will attain me without doubt. And then 8:16 says, from the highest planet in the material world down to the lowest, all are places of misery, wherein repeated birth and death take place. But one who attains to my abode, O son of Kunti, never takes birth again. And so we have a beautiful process to gradually purify ourselves of material desire by giving ourselves a heightened spiritual satisfaction, getting a higher taste. And even in the Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, they mention that there are 5 impediments to being successful in yoga. They call them kleshas. One is nescience, or like ignorance of what is going on here. One is ego, or thinking that I am this body, I am this mind, which is really a temporary costume that I'm wearing. And then a third one and fourth one are attachment and aversion. I remember that this has brought me happiness before, so I'm going to try to manipulate the world to bring it back to me. I'm going to, try to make it happen. Or I remember that this thing was brought me sadness in the past. I'm going to try to avoid it, to do whatever I can to not experience that. And then one is clinging to life, or basically fear that I'm going to die, which, we can only rise above that by understanding that actually my soul doesn't die ever. I never actually took birth. I never actually die. I am the person just witnessing my lives. And so the Bhagavad Gita aligns with this. The Bhakti philosophy says that the different types of yoga culminating in bhakti, that they weaken these seeds of karma, or they burn the seeds of karma, so that actually by learning to, instead of having a focus of this is for my enjoyment, we cultivate the intention that let me dedicate or give this back. Let me complete the cycle of gratitude. Let me return everything with love back to the source of love. And by that practice, we do not create karma for ourselves. There's no more adding to the stock of seeds of karma. They get burned up. So we may still be experiencing some reactions from our previous lives, but it's like unplugging a fan. It's going to gradually wind down. So our job is just to tolerate that stuff and continue trying to practice dovetailing everything that we have in the service of God. So yeah, we're just about ready to wind up there. This practice of seeing the bigger picture of cause and effect can empower us to be more mindful of our choices, right? It's almost like we're co-creating a new future. So it's very empowering. It's not about like blame or shame or guilt about stuff I've done in the past. Everybody's done stupid stuff. But it's about knowing that I have a choice. I can choose a very bright future for myself and reframe what seem to be obstacles into opportunities. Right? So this stuff is going to keep on coming to us. All kinds of problems are going to come up. All kinds of difficult situations. It's not going to stop. But for the bhakti yogi, they understand that actually this is good. These are opportunities for me to transform my life. I can focus gradually more on principles than outcomes. So generally, we just want to live happily ever after, just stop the problems, right? But what if it's just like, how can I become a virtuous person? How can I use this difficult situation to try to help, right? Help others, try to bring some light into my own life. So it's a kind of adventure in virtuous living that will ultimately lead to the ultimate goal of love, right? So it doesn't get much better than that. Yeah, there's a lot to look forward to. So yeah, there's so much to learn about this topic, but I hope that you've gotten a few extra things to think about. And I think, Damodar Priya, were you wanting to go ahead and get ready for a shift?
Thank you so much, Gopi, for that presentation. And I just want to share in our chat the breakout questions before we go into our breakout rooms. And we'll also be sharing that in our WhatsApp groups. So I sent the invitation information out in the chat too, as well. But however, if you don't see it, don't worry. There's always someone in the group that is in the WhatsApp groups already, and they'll be able to help you with that. So the questions are, please take a few minutes to consider how actions and desires in the past have brought you to this current life situation. And how are the actions and desires that you have now likely to impact your existence in the future? And is there anything that you would adjust to upgrade what's coming to you? Oh, okay, so welcome back, everyone. This is our Q&A and reflection section. This is our time to be able to give either appreciation to our speaker, ask questions, or share any reflections from your breakout room experience that you really would like to share with the whole group. So if you do want to share, please feel free to share, raise a virtual hand, and I'd be happy to call on you. And in the meantime, I did actually get an anonymous question already, Gopi. So I was wondering if everybody else isn't, it looks like we still have some time before someone else asks. So the person who sent me the question, I wrote it down. They said, in your talk, you mentioned that our job with karma is to tolerate. So how do we factor in abuse? That's all they wrote. So can you kind of dive into that for us, please, Gopi? Gopi, I think you have to turn on your microphone, please.
There we go. Sorry. Yeah, so that doesn't mean that we can't have boundaries, right? There's no benefit in allowing ourselves to continue to receive abuse. We have to try to assess the situation and take care of ourselves. So yeah, if there's abuse, try to get help from your friends. Try to decide what I can comfortably live with. Do I need to cut this person out entirely? Do I need to tell them I will only speak to you under these, conditions? Or so yeah, sometimes very, very uncomfortable things will come to us in relationships, but we want to take care of ourselves and keep our center. As far as my goal is to see Krishna in everyone's heart, to remember that I am a spirit soul, and I want to be in a situation where I can have a peaceful mind to prosecute spiritual life. Yeah.
Thank you, Gopi. And I'll keep an eye out to see if they have a follow-up to that. But thank you. That's a good way to see it. And Eileen, you had your hand up. Can you please unmute?
Hare Krishna, Gopi Sandal, Prabhu, thank you so much for this class. My question is more of getting a little bit more articulate in, when people ask about karma, like my mom asked me, like we've had conversations, and I feel like I use way too many words because I'm still trying to figure it out myself. So things like, if karma, my mom believes in heaven and hell, and like you do bad things, you go to hell and you're there forever, right? And I clearly don't believe that. And so she'll say something like, okay, well, this dictator in power or this horrible person in leadership doing all these awful things to people, how'd they get there then, huh? Like if they were, like if they're really bad, really, really evil, awful, bad people today, they're in these places of power. Like, how do you equate that with their karma? And obviously we don't know if they're happy, and most likely they're not. And we don't know what their, next lives are going to be and what their past lives look like. But what's a good elevator pitch or a condensed version to describe karma in that perspective?
Yeah, so somehow or other, they have gotten into that position. And, there are many stories in the Mahabharata, if you've ever looked into, the pastimes of Lord Krishna when he actually visited this planet, the story of Greater India. Things were not smooth and pleasant. It was full of all kinds of conflict and trying to figure out how to deal with mean people in control. And so, like we said, it may not so much be about outcome as about how I can use these situations to be a virtuous person myself, and try to we can start at home by the way I am dealing with the world. I may not be able to change someone at that level, but or sometimes people end up with parents who are really mean, and it teaches them how to not be. Teaches them. Is still a teacher, basically. And so
So Gopi, to follow up on that, does that mean that when we're explaining karma to someone who's new to it, and thank you, Eileen, for that question. I feel like it's really relevant, as I wrote in the chat, because a lot of us have these kind of new to bhakti conversations going. So if someone that's very new to karma thinks that someone is in power because they've acquired a lot of good karma in a previous life, is that incorrect or correct? Like, should we clarify that for them or not? Just as a follow-up.
Yeah, I mean, it's not an accident. Somehow or other, they've gotten into that position, and because of desire. And like we said, a mix of what they deserve and what they desire. And then, we don't always make the best decisions after we get into a powerful position. We've even seen that with spiritual people, that they may get into a situation where they're in charge, and then things start to get messy. You got to start to slip up. So we want to have a good eye and a bad eye. See that person is an eternal spirit soul. They, like me, are trying to move towards their highest good, but there are all these impediments being brought in front of them that cause us to suffer from lust, greed, envy, pride, anger, and so each one of us is we may not be able to fix everybody else, but we can try to become an example ourselves.
Thank you, Gopi, and thank you, Eileen. If anybody else has any questions or reflections that they want to share, please raise your virtual hand. I did receive another anonymous question, so if nobody else has something right now, I'll go ahead and read their question. So they said, thank you, Gopi Gita, for the class. I am a mother, and as a mother, sometimes it's really difficult to explain to others that I understand that children can have their own karma, because they feel like children are innocent and they shouldn't be suffering because they are innocent. It seems like they have more of like that Christian background going on as well. So how do I explain to my family members and others who kind of fight with me about this? Oh, they're okay. Apparently they're fighting about it, about the whole difference between children and karma. So if you could kind of unpack that a little bit, please.
Yeah. So yeah, it seems like that's kind of a common way of thinking, that children are innocent. And so, it may not be the time to like try to convince them or have an argument. Maybe what, the way I think is that, well, some children are born in a very fortunate situation with a silver spoon in their mouth. And another baby is born in a very horrible suffering situation. Why is that? So we actually have an answer for it. But many people, they're not ready to know, or they don't want to know. They just want to be compassionate to the innocent. And so, we can just ask them, oh, that's interesting. You really feel strongly about that, and tell me more. Or that you must really be a caring person, or but if they're you can kind of tell with a little experience that some people are just like, they just want to pick a fight, and if you tell them so many solutions, they'll just grind you up. So but if somebody's genuinely wanting to know with an open heart, you can try to share with them. And often, children, when they're young, they still kind of are reflecting the karma of the parents. They do have a very simple life. Not until they're maybe around 12 years old, their own karmas start to come into play. you start to understand what their real interests are and what their desires are separate from their parents. So that's an interesting thing to me too.
Thank you, Gopi. And they just sent a quick message saying thank you. And that it seems like what they hear that you're saying is that just reflecting back the compassion for those who are coming from that space is helpful. And then and then they laughed and they said, but I will remember not to fight with those that just are looking to fight with me and don't really actually want to learn. So, so it seems like they got the message. Thank you, Gopi. And Rukmini, you have your hand up. You could go ahead and share, please. We'd love to hear from you. You just have to turn on your microphone, Rukmini, please.
Sorry, everyone. I'm in a passenger seat in the car, so I'm having a little trouble here. I had a couple of questions. I think, Gopi, it's so beautiful hearing you speak on this topic, because I think you have such internal reflections. Sometimes people misjudge the philosophy of karma and talk about how, well, the philosophy of karma is just blaming the victim. So how can you defeat that kind of misunderstanding?
Oh yeah, thank you for bringing that up. So we do have this understanding that helps us personally, you know, to understand what and why we're going through things. At the same time, you know, with other people, we can focus on what is my dharma in this situation. It's not that I think, you know, oh, because of their bad karma, they're really suffering.
Then turn right onto Cutler Street.
Oops. And so, you know, like if a mother's baby was crying uncontrollably and she just thought, oh, they're just crying because of their bad karma, you know, that would be horrible. So no, they're thinking, how can I comfort them? How can I help? Right? So for a compassionate person, we just want to you know, try to help. You know, ultimately, you know, all of us are going through rough patches sooner or later. It may even not have been in this life, but we know that at some point in the not too distant past, we have gone through a really rough patch or been a person who is not kind. It's quite possible that we've tried everything out to get to this point, right? We tried it out and we're like, that didn't work so good. So now, you know, we are, we have the opportunity to just see that, okay, everybody else is in that situation for them, you know, if they are treating others unkindly or going through very difficult suffering, we can just know that, oh man, this material world is a rough place. How can we solve this situation? How can we help more and more people to get out of this problematic situation and to actually find what the soul is hankering for? That's what we're here for.
Thank you, Gopi, and thank you, Rukmini, for that question. It's a very relevant question because we had an anonymous question that was sent to me that was very much along that line. But I see that Maria has her hand up. So Maria, please unmute yourself.
Thank you so much for this topic. I would like to ask, so I'm just going to share something about myself. I have a very difficult karma in my family. My parents had been very, very abusive to me, both physically. I've been through the war when I was a child. I live in Croatia. And then my ex-husband also repeated the same. So I can intuitively understand that that is my karma and I have to tolerate, at the same time putting the distance and doing everything. I just don't understand how I can see the teaching in that, because I read in the Srimad Bhagavatam that Krishna says, your karma is your enemy, but is also your friend, your guru, and your Ishvara. And I'm still there in the enemy part. So I try to survive as best as I can. You know, I try to manage the situation also because I have children. So in this family, you know, I want to take care of my children the best as I can. And then also to deal with those people that are so aggressive to me, really without reason, because I haven't done anything. So I'm trying, I think on the personal level, I'm functioning, I'm trying to do my best. I just don't get the teaching, you know, even if I can understand that it was from previous life, because when my mom got pregnant with me, she wanted to abort. So she disconnected from me. My father was abusive. You know, at 8 years old, I had the war. When I was 15, my father died. So I can understand rationally that that is my karma from previous life. I just don't understand what I had to learn. I just see, okay, I had to survive. I had to learn to tolerate and to survive. But I don't know what lenses do I have to put to really see, okay, so this karma is good for me because I have learned that. So how can I make that shift from surviving to a negative karma to actually seeing the lesson and maybe even one day being grateful? Thank you so much.
Wow, yeah, it's rough. So, you know, one thing is, you know, that knowing what we do, we can understand that those people are acting inappropriately. We don't know why. We don't know what happened to them in their previous life that caused them to be so abusive. And so they are suffering, but they think that by passing this on to someone else, it's going to make me feel better. But it's not working. And they just can't figure it out. They still haven't figured it out. It keeps going on. And so, you know, that is something, you know, something similar is happening so often in families that we tend to, over generations, we think, you know, I hate them, they're so horrible. But then we learn to treat other people in the same way, thinking that, you know, that's gonna somehow or other make me feel better. But then at some point in the long story of each family, there's going to be a person who says, you know what? They just don't get it. They just don't understand. They're suffering so badly and they're making me suffer. How can I just, you know, forgive them for their terrible mistakes and try to, you know, find the love in my heart for them, even though they're, you know, it hurts. And if there are things you can do to take care of yourself, to take space, and that would help. But otherwise, you know, if you can just like tell when they're angry, you know, reflect that to them rather than taking it on yourself. Say, oh my gosh, you feel so bad about this. You're so angry. You really don't like that I've done this, or that, you know, I hear you. If they can just feel heard, sometimes that's a little, you know, tiny opening to them go, you know, being self-reflective. But yeah, so anybody else want to add something?
Yeah, I think Rukmini had her microphone on. Rukmini, would you like to share something in regards to Maria's share or question?
I just have another question, really, I think, Gopi, you answered beautifully, to reflect back and to try to not take it on yourself, to reflect back that, I I was just going to say, I love what you said, Gopi. I'm afraid I'm going to lose power because I'm not plugged in, but just if I lose power, please you share about next month. But I love what you said about
I'm sorry, Rukmini.
kind of mothering, bringing up other people. Like a mother wouldn't say to her crying babe. Can you hear me?
You're breaking up a little bit. Sorry.
Could you hear me now? Can
Yeah.
you hear me now? Okay.
Yeah.
A mother wouldn't say to her crying baby, the baby's crying, and the mother wouldn't say, oh, it's just your karma. So to be able to see the world like a loving mother, to see others in the world like, not in a manipulating way, but in a loving way. This is my child. How can I relieve suffering? I love what you said, Gopi, about this is my dharma, to try to relieve the suffering of people's karma. Like a mother left, like a loving, and Prabhupada says that in the Bhagavad Gita, like a pure devotee sees the world like a loving father sees his children, or we would say like a loving mother. So I love that. I thought that was very helpful. Viktor Frankl is a wonderful book about we are he says we are response able. We can choose our response to different stimuli. We're not we don't have to be triggered. We can choose our response. But I had another question, Gopi. I'm wondering, some people say, well, devotees have no karma. So can you reflect on that?
Yeah, so we mentioned how, for devotees, they are learning how to dedicate everything that they have to Lord Krishna. So their bodies, their minds, their intelligence, their stuff, their skills, trying to offer those to Krishna. And by that process, just like when we offer our food to Krishna, it becomes karma free, right? So it's like that with everything in our life. It can become karma free by Krishna's grace. But that, like we said, the fan is still spinning, perhaps. When we are acting out of self-centered motivation, the fan is plugged in. For every action we do, there's going to be a reaction. And that is our teacher in this material world. When we come to the point of deciding, I'm going to stop that. Everything belongs to God. Let me give it back. And then we unplug the fan. The blades are still going around slowly, trying, until they stop. And then, so it's a process that gradually the devotee does become free from karma, or they may have what they call Krishna karma. Maybe they were meant to die at a certain time, and Krishna decides, nah, I want them to stay around a little bit longer and do something for me. So that might happen.
Thank you, Gopi, and thank you, Rukmini, for kind of unpacking that further for us. And I also just wanted to take a moment to thank Maria for her vulnerability and for that share. It takes a lot to just kind of put your heart out there to everyone, and it helps all of us learn. So thank you so much for that. And we had some great suggestions from Marina in the chat for some books, and one of them is by Viktor Frankl, which our dear Rukmini mentioned as well. I know that I'm sorry, go ahead, Gopi.
In The Journey Within, there's a beautiful story about the woman who suffered so much abuse And then when she saw a broken limb, she realized that this could be used to help. Even though I'm broken, I could be used to help others. And then she started an amazing orphanage gradually. So go ahead.
No, thank you for sharing that, because I was actually going to ask if anybody else had any questions or reflections. And we did have, oh, great. So Pamela wrote in the chat, I read somewhere that sometimes one person in a family carries all the pain for other family members, and that can lead them to seek out change. Maybe it leads you to the path of bhakti, and change begins to trickle down the generations. Wow, thank you so much, Pamela, for sharing that. Yeah, I was actually going to ask, in mind with the whole idea that as devotees, as people who love God or Krishna and are doing devotional service to him, it's said that, our kind of quote unquote pious activities or kind of devotional service can then help our family members 7 generations back and 7 generations forward. So I'm wondering, like, how kind of recognizing that helps us, those who have like a difficult relationship with your parents or your family members, how just even thinking about that can shift our compassion. And I just share that just because, Maria, again, I really identified with what you shared, because I also had an abusive relationship. I had a parent who was very abusive. And it wasn't until after decades of therapy and a lot of spiritual work that all of a sudden I had the realization that, wow, I'm no longer afraid of that person. If anything, I feel compassion for them. And I shared in a group of Vaishnavis, I said, and I realized that now I'm okay with that person getting the benefit of my, pious activities or whatever my devotional service is, because I realized they need it more than maybe I do, because they don't have that connection to Krishna. They don't have this association that I get, once a month, and the other associations that I get. So again, we're all different, but I just thank you again for sharing, because it made me think of that. So does anybody else have any questions or reflections that they'd like to do? If not, I think, Rukmini, do you feel like you have enough connection to do the end kind of announcements? You just have to turn on your microphone. It looks like she might be having difficulties. Okay, so I can go ahead and share, but before we share about next month's Urban Devi, please write in the chat your appreciation for this month's Urban Devi with Gopi. If you heard something that really...
Can you hear me now?
Oh, yes, now we can.
I can't hear you. Can you?
Oh, you can't hear me?
Can you give the...
I'll do the announcement.
Report about next month, because I can't hear you at all.
Okay, no worries. Okay, so as I was going to say, if you want to please write your appreciation for Gopi in the chat. Gopi, on behalf of myself and Rukmini and Surbi, those of us that kind of co-host this, thank you so much for being here. And if anybody else wants to give their thanks in the chat, we'll share that with her later on. So for next month, dear ladies, our next Urban Devi will be September 21st, and we're going to have Danya Rico. So for those of you who know her, exactly, I see some excited faces. This is an amazing opportunity. So Danya is going to be speaking on relationships, the garden of the spirit. And she's written a little description for us, an interactive discussion about the importance of healthy relationships in our spiritual development. Again, Krishna always perfectly arranged, because we've had so many questions about this in this Urban Devi, and that's exactly what we're going to dive into in the next. So she says, join us to explore Bhakti wisdom, as well as tools developed by relationship experts to learn how the different relationships in our lives are actually fertile ground for nurturing our devotional heart. So I think this is right up your alley, Maria. I think that Krishna has arranged this perfectly for you. So hopefully you can join us next month. So thank you again, Gopi, for joining us. Thank you, Rukmini, for making it here, even if you're having technical difficulties. And thank you all of you for being here. So we hope that you can join us for the next Urban Devi. Hare Krishna.